Get this in my appropriate mode, you might say. Hopefully you are seeing an image of an eclipse there. Is that looking good?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for having me. Today I'm going to be talking about this upcoming very special event that we're having here in the state of Maine. We haven't had one since 1963. And if you missed this one, well, you only have a short wait. 2079 is the next time you'll have a chance to see totality here in the state of Maine. So all right, so I'm Shawn Laatsch, as mentioned. I'm the director of the Versant Power Astronomy Center, Jordan Planetarium, up at the University of Maine. If you haven't been to that planetarium in a while, the planetarium, of course, was rebuilt and reopened in 2014. So it's a brand new facility. Well, it'll be 10 years this October. Hard to believe that much time has passed, but it's a relatively new facility. It is the largest and most technologically advanced in the state. We see, of course, a whole variety of folks. We do lots of school groups and universities, but of course, we also have public programs. The new planetarium is really, I tell folks, it's like sort of an IMAX on steroids if you haven't been. So there's this full dome video that surrounds you and immerses you in a whole variety of content. And along with doing astronomy, we also do a whole variety of other sciences, everything from environmental and ecology to climate to microbiology, you name it, we sort of can do it in this center, which is really is a unique tool for visualization. We can take you all the way from being inside of a virus all the way out to the edge of the universe through real data sets. We have a small lobby area that has some interactive exhibits as well in the classroom area that can be used for a variety of hands-on activities. We use it for teaching astronomy labs, things of that nature as well. And I mentioned that we have a variety of public programs. We always have sort of Friday nights at 7 o'clock is our general public program. This month it is about eclipses as expected. Sunday afternoons at 2, we have a program geared for families with younger children that, of course, is going to target the kids. And then we also have a whole variety of music entertainment programs as well. This month, of course, is featuring Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon because during a total solar eclipse, the dark portion of the moon is facing us. So a little bit of a tie-in there. But we invite you to come out and see us if you haven't been in a while. We change our programs monthly, so there's always something new to see at the planetarium. With that, getting into eclipses, since we're talking about this total solar eclipse coming up here on April 8th, eclipses sort of come in what I call 3 flavors, if you will. There are partial solar eclipses. Most people have seen at least a few of those during their lifetime because they're over a larger portion of the Earth. There's an annular eclipse, which is basically a special type of partial. In this case, the angular diameter of the moon doesn't quite cover that of the sun. And the reason for this is the moon orbits in an ellipse. Sometimes it's closer, sometimes it's farther away. In the last 15 to 20 years, the media has created this term called supermoon, which some of you might have heard, but that really doesn't exist. And I always get a little bit irritated when I hear that term because we never say there's a mini moon. So why would we say there's a supermoon? But that being said, the moon orbits in an ellipse, and we have something called a perigeel moon and an apogee moon. Perigee is when the moon is closest to us. Apogee is when it's farthest away. And that happens every month because, again, the orbit is elliptical. If it's so far, if it is at apogee and a solar eclipse takes place, that's when you'll get an annular solar eclipse where the angular diameter won't quite cover the sun. But the most spectacular, of course, are the total solar eclipses. And to see totality, you have to be in the right place at the right time. And that's a very key thing. All right, in terms of these total solar eclipses. As I mentioned, the last one here, time we had totality in Maine was in 63. We won't have it again to 79. So it gives you an idea of how special it is to be inside that path of totality. And it's only inside that path of totality that you can see the corona, the atmosphere of the sun, which is really the most beautiful portion of the eclipse. Well, to have a solar eclipse, basically we need to have the sun, the moon, and the earth in a perfect alignment. And we have this once a month at what we call new moon. But oftentimes that shadow isn't projected on the earth, it's above or below. And that's because the moon's orbit is tilted roughly 5 degrees to Earth's orbit. So as a result, that shadow will miss us most of the time. However, there are crossing places in that orbit, and those are called the nodes. And if that node takes place at either a new moon or a full moon, then you will get an eclipse. If it takes place at new moon, you will get a solar eclipse. If it takes place at full moon, then you will get a lunar eclipse. When we do have that happening at new moon, basically the moon's shadow will cross a section of the Earth. There are two sort of shadows, if you will. The darkest inner shadow called the umbra, that's where you're going to see totality. And then there's this outer shadow called the penumbra, which stretches over a much larger area. So you might remember back in 2017, we had a solar eclipse that crossed the entire continental United States for the first time in a number of years. It started off in Oregon and made its way down to South Carolina. The entire US saw at least a partial eclipse. We did here even in Maine. We had over 1,000 people at the planetarium that day trying to look through our solar telescope out back. And that was just for a partial phase. So it gives you an idea. So again, but we weren't seeing totality here in Maine. I actually went out west for that one and let my graduate students hold down the fort at the university for the partial phases here, and got to see it out west as a total solar eclipse. The path of totality itself is several thousand miles long. However, it's typically only 100 to 150 miles wide. And if you're on either side of that, again, you only get a partial solar eclipse. So it is really important to be in that totality, that umbral shadow, if you will. In fact, eclipse chasers are even sometimes called umbra fields because they are trying to chase and be inside that dark umbral shadow, if you will. The next total solar eclipse that is coming up, if you will, is going to happen on April 8th of 2024. And the path starts off in the Pacific Ocean, crosses over into Mexico, up through Texas, in through the sort of the Midwest area, if you will, Indiana, Ohio, up into New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and then even into Canada before it finishes just off the coast of Ireland. Now, this eclipse again is going to be the last major one that crosses the United States until roughly 2045. But again, the entire United States is going to get minimally a partial. And here in Maine, we will get totality if you're within that shadow band itself. Now, I do tell folks this, I will be here in Maine because I'm part of a NASA project called CATE, which stands for Continental American Telescopic Eclipse. NASA loves its acronyms. And this project, basically, I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator. One of my grad students is the Northeast Regional Trainer. And we're setting up 35 stations from Texas all the way to Maine to record polarity data of the corona. And this project, of course, there are 3 regional leads. We were the Northeast. There's a Midwest and a Southwest lead. And we've been training people. So I trained 2 teams here in Maine, a team for Versant, a team for New Hampshire, and several teams for New York as part of our duties with that project. And the goal is to put together a movie of how the corona changes over about an hour of time, trying to understand a little bit of the inner workings of the sun. Now, I'm going to be here in Maine because this eclipse is happening in Maine and totality is happening here in Maine this time. However, if I could be anywhere for this, being quite honest, I would not stay here in Maine. I would go to Texas. And it's not that I like Texas all that much. I really don't. However, Texas has an 80% chance of clear skies. Maine has a 40% chance of clear skies. Texas gets 4 minutes and 28 seconds of totality. Here in Maine, we get a maximum of 3 minutes and 28 seconds of totality. Now, it's not that things are always bigger in Texas, but remember I mentioned that moon's orbit is elliptical. And it just so happens that during its passage over Texas, it's going to be a little bit closer. Hence, it will have a little bit more totality. When the eclipse happened in 2017, it started off over in Oregon. There it was about 2 minutes long. Over Kentucky, it actually was 2 minutes and 40 seconds long. So Kentucky was the best place to be for that one, for the longest amount of totality. Every second of totality counts when you're trying to collect data, but even viewing it, because it is such a spectacular event, one of the most spectacular things you will see in all of nature. So this eclipse again is going to, like I say, cross the entire United States, and everyone will at least get a partial. Hopefully our weather will cooperate. But here in Maine, this gives you a little bit of a better look at our state. And I tell folks you don't want to be in Bangor or Orono or Vesey or Augusta or Portland or any of those places, because then you will only get a partial. I have been telling folks that, obviously the best places to be are along that center line. And if you can sort of see my cursor here, but sort of up in this area here, we're going to be in Jackson, which is right on that center line. But also, Holton, Millinocket's a little bit below, but the center line, it really goes right over Mount Katahdin. I was begging them to let us in, but of course, with mud season, they were very reluctant, and I do understand it's kind of hard for them to manage that given the shape that the roads can be in. And of course, we all know Maine's weather is very interesting given this past weekend. So we do have things like this that can make it kind of difficult. But Lincoln, Dover-Foxcroft, where you guys are, Milo, those areas also get totality. Now, when you are just into that path, like Milo and Dover-Foxcroft, you're not going to get the full 3 minutes and 28 seconds. You will probably get more like 40 to 50 seconds of totality where you guys are. So if you can travel even a little bit farther to the center line, that's great. But I definitely know it can be challenging, especially because this eclipse starts around 2:20 in the afternoon, totality around 3:30, and the partial phases end around 4:40. Now, you'll notice I said around in that. And that's because eclipse timing is very specific to where you are. That shadow is moving across our planet roughly 2,000 miles an hour. So the eclipse will start, for instance, in Jackman before it starts over Mount Katahdin, before it starts over Millinocket, before it starts over Holton. All right. So for instance, the timing in Jackman, I know very well because of the data collection I have to do. The eclipse starts there at 2:18 p.m. Totality is from 3:29:29 to 3:56 or 3:52:52, excuse me. And then the partial phases end at 3:38. So it gives you, or 4:48, excuse me. So that gives you an idea that it's very much to the second there. But again, Mexico and Texas are going to get about 4 minutes and 28 seconds. We're going to get about 3 minutes and 28 seconds. And actually, Jackman gets 3 minutes and 28 seconds. Around Holton, they get 3 minutes and 26 seconds. So it's even a slight amount of difference in terms of the totality, even within our own state, given this path. You'll notice I have a website up there, eclipse2024.org. You can look there for your city and you can get exact timings. Also, will let you know exactly how much of the sun is going to be covered. If you're outside of the area of totality, for instance, in Bangor, it's going to be 98.7%. But again, there's a huge difference between even 99.9% and 100% being inside that path, because only inside that path of totality do you get to see the umbra. So what would you see? Well, this gives you a time-lapse sequence. Again, the whole eclipse lasts a little over 2 hours, 2 hours and maybe 15 minutes or so. During the beginning phases, you will have the partial phases. And this is where the moon is slowly covering up the disk of the sun. And that will take roughly an hour, hour and 10 minutes. Then you'll have totality. And then after totality, the process will reverse as the moon moves off the sun and reveals the sun to us once again. Totality itself can last anywhere from a few seconds up to 7.5 minutes. The last one we had that was 7.5 minutes was in 1991. We won't have another one like that until 2132, which is quite a ways into the future. Again, this one we're getting about 3.5 to 4.5 minutes of totality, depending on where you are in that path. The one during 2017 was a little over 2.5 minutes of totality. So this one is a bit better in terms of length or duration of totality. But again, the whole eclipse will last a bit over 2 hours. That totality portion, the very special portion, only lasts anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes. Now, people ask why I say this is the most spectacular event in all of nature. And I tell folks that the difference between seeing a partial, even if it's at 99%, and a total is like the difference between seeing a lightning bug or getting hit by lightning. Or it's the difference between flying in a passenger plane and jumping out the window of a passenger plane. Or it's like taking your kids 99% of the way to Disneyland or taking them inside. Totally different experience for them and you in terms of how happy they are with you. Again, this is one of the most spectacular events in all of nature. So if you're really close to the path, make sure you get into the path. It's really great that at least over Foxcroft, you guys are in the path, so you will get totality there. Now, it is, and I tell folks, you know, it is one of the most spectacular things because it's not just the corona of the sun and the sun that you're seeing, which looks like a black hole in the sky, but it's all the things that go with it. There's twilight in 360 degrees all the way around the horizon. The temperature drops a few degrees, the winds die down, birds and animals pay attention. It's really a full body experience. And the first time people experience one of these, they really get a sense of why ancient people feared them. I mean, people used to think there was a dragon eating the sun or shot flaming arrows to try to rekindle the sun because, again, it is one of those things that is so spectacular. And of course, in ancient times, people knew the sun was the source of light and heat, and they were very worried if it started to go out in the middle of the day. So this is really a dramatic thing. In fact, there's even a battle between the Medes and the Lydians, an ancient battle prior to the Common Era, where they were fighting a war, and in the middle of it, a total solar eclipse took place. Both sides were, put down their arms and signed an armistice because they were so concerned. So it gives you an idea. Wouldn't that be wonderful if that happened today with some of our conflicts in the world? But it does give you an idea. These things are really, really dramatic. So this is just a little bit, trying to share a little bit with you. I also tell folks that videos and photographs really don't do it all justice because it's a whole body experience, like I just mentioned. But this was out in 2017. This was during the partial phases, and this was during totality. Again, it doesn't get as dark as night, but it gets dark enough to see brighter stars and brighter planets. Like during this one, you'll be able to see Jupiter and Venus on either side of the sun. You'll see some of the brighter stars. And again, this real twilighty effect. Now, if it's cloudy on the day of the eclipse, which is a possibility here in Maine, we're hoping not, but if it is, then the sky will get as dark as night for those few moments of totality. All right, so it really is a dramatic event. And then this is totality. It's just spectacular. You're seeing the atmosphere of the sun. The surface of the sun, of course, is called the photosphere, and it's never safe to look at that. You always have to use some type of protection. We use sunglasses during our daily lives. That doesn't protect our eyes from the sun directly. It protects us from glare, so we can do our sporting events or driving or things like that. But if you're going to be looking at the sun during any of the partial phases, you do need to have those solar eclipse glasses or have a solar filter because, again, the sun is really powerful. It can burn your eyes, and it's really important. But during totality, it is safe to look because you're seeing the corona. And that corona is only 1/10,000th as bright as the surface of the sun. This image here was one taken by myself and my grad student, Nikita Sani. As part of that CAPE project, on April 20th last year, we were in Australia. We were testing 3 of the rigs for this NASA project and 3 particular cameras. And this was the one that ours took. And you can see this really beautiful corona. We had 62 seconds of totality. So it was 4 days of travel each way to get to where we were, a lot of time in planes. And then we had 5 days on the ground to kind of get 1 day to recover, a few days to get set up and do a bunch of testing. Took data in the day after the eclipse. We jumped on the plane and came back. So a very short time on the ground there, but we were lucky. We had 62 seconds of totality, really beautiful corona. And the corona this year should be even more spectacular because we're right at the solar maximum. So it's really going to be spectacular. You can see a variety of prominences around the edge of the sun. Those are some big solar storms that can impact Earth. And one of the reasons we're studying this corona really is to understand the interaction of the solar wind with our planet. We know that we get aurora, that sometimes these big solar storms can knock out satellites or can even influence or knock out power grids. They can be a danger to our astronauts on board the International Space Station. And particularly when we start to send people back to the moon, as NASA is planning to do, and possibly onto Mars, it's really important that we understand what we call space weather or solar weather, because it does influence our planet as well. So it is one of those things that we're trying to get a better handle on and have a better understanding of. But again, it is amazing to see this thing. It looks like there's a black hole in the sky just before totality. The sky is this really eerie, sort of silvery color. Shadows are different. It really is one of the most spectacular things you'll see in all of nature. And a lot of times after folks have seen their first one, they're more than willing to travel. I've had a chance to see 5 total solar eclipses during my lifetime, having traveled for them, mainly because of the profession I'm in. And each one has been special and spectacular. So again, really hoping we get some good weather and we can all see this one here coming up on April 8th. Now, as I mentioned, if you don't get to see this one, you'll have to wait until 2079 before there is a total solar eclipse here in Maine. Now, that being said, solar eclipses happen on average every 12 to 18 months, but you have to be, again, in the right place at the right time. So you can see here was one in 2017. We have the one in 2024. August of 2045 is the next one that's going to cross the entire continental United States after that. But then you'll see, again, 52, things like that. If you missed this one and you wanted to go to the next one after this one on April 8th, there will be one in 2026. That one is going to cross from Greenland into Iceland and down into Spain. Eclipses are the paths of totality, cover the entire Earth. There are times they're visible at in Antarctica or at the Arctic. So again, they can be anywhere on the surface of our Earth. And this just gives you an idea of a little bit of North America over the next, 100 years or so. But it does give you an idea that we do get them. So again, every 12 to 18 months we'll have one, but you have to be in exactly the right place and the right time to see that total solar eclipse in totality in particular. Now, I mentioned eye safety before. It's never safe to look directly at the sun with your unaided eye. Doing so for any length of time can do damage. Now, during a normal day, we might glance to see where the sun is, but we don't stare at it. But during an eclipse, people want to see what's going on, so they tend to be staring at it and looking at it, and that's where the problem comes in. And the sun is, again, so powerful it can burn and damage your retinas, and you won't even feel that happening. So please view this thing safely. Eclipse glasses are one way to do so. These are very economical, typically $2 a pair. In some cases, some libraries are giving them out free if they have a few to do so with. But these block out 99.9% of the light of the sun, making it safe to look at the sun. If you look at anything else, you won't see anything. I often get asked about other ways. Welder's glass will work, but it must be number 14 or higher. Anything less than 14, you're taking a chance. And again, you need your eyes for lots of things besides looking at eclipses, so please take care of them and view the sun safely. You need this for all of the partial phases. Again, during totality, then it's safe to take it off because the corona is only 1/10,000th as bright as the surface of the sun. But these are really important to protect your eyes. We do have them at the planetarium. We've been doing lots with school groups and getting schools ready and providing school sets. But again, you might check your local libraries too. Some of the libraries have a few to give out, typically 1 or 2 per family. Now, if you can't get a hold of solar eclipse glasses, another option is to do something called pinhole projection. And this is an example here. You basically have a pinhole that you're turned with your back towards the sun. So you're not looking directly at the sun. You poke a pinhole in a piece of cardboard and allow it to shine on the other side, and you're seeing a projected image of the sun. And you can watch the partial phases that way. I've even seen people take an index card and poke their name in the year of the eclipse or the date of the eclipse, and then stand with their back towards the sun and let it shine through, and it creates a really pretty image, and you'll see all those partial phases with that. If you're underneath a tree, sometimes the holes in the leaves will actually create little pinhole projectors, and you can see these little eclipses on the ground, the shadows of, the projected image of the sun on the ground. So projection is another safe way to view it as well. If, however, you are looking through a telescope, a couple things there too. People sometimes do that. You do need a full glass solar filter. Do not use those solar filter glasses and look through a telescope, because You know, kind of think about ants underneath a magnifying glass. When you're magnifying that light, you really have to be careful. So for telescopes, you need a full glass solar filter. And I tell folks, get the glass one, don't do the Mylar. Glass is much safer, especially because you're magnifying that light, making it even more intense. And they're only a few bucks more. But those solar filters, again, will block out 99.9%, making it safe. If you want to take pictures of the sun during the eclipse, again, for the partial phases, you would need to have some type of filter so that you don't damage the sensor in your camera. During totality, you wouldn't need it, but again, you would need it during those partial phases. So do make sure you do that. Our website, astro.umaine.edu, has a whole variety of information about the eclipse there. There was an annular solar eclipse last October, and it was partial here. So we've actually removed that information now that it's over, but we have a whole bunch of information there about April 8th coming up. You can click on maps there to help you find where the eclipse is taking place and put in your city to find the percentages. We have some safety videos there. There's information about activities for students, just lots of information, and of course, a bunch about our upcoming program. The University of Maine also has an Eclipse page, and we have a link to it there because there's a number of projects. There's the project I'm on, which is called Kate, but also Rick Eason is a high-altitude balloon guy, and he and his team are actually going to launch a balloon which will get above the clouds. They've done this with the last a few eclipses, and they're going to be doing it again with this one, where they do some high-altitude ballooning to image the sun. They'll be streaming that as well, and that UMaine page has a link for streaming that too. There's also streams. Our page also will list some areas you can find NASA's website, which will have a stream of the eclipse from different places in the US, so that if we do get clouded out, hopefully folks can see a stream. It's not the same thing as experiencing in person, but it is something. So that's another resource in case you need it. Also, we have some special eclipse programming. I've mentioned Friday nights, of course, and Sunday afternoons, but the upcoming next two Saturdays, March 30th and April 6th, we have programming starting at 10 a.m. and going to 5 p.m. So basically all day programming. We have 3 different shows to choose from. One's for general adults, for families with kids, and one's sort of geared towards middle school that will sort of scale up or down, if you will, about the eclipse. We'll be doing solar viewing through the telescope out back, weather permitting. We'll have some hands-on activities. So if you're interested in any of that, get your tickets early. We've been selling, most of our eclipse programming has been selling out. We still have tickets for this weekend, but I'm telling folks, get them early because that is one of those things that we've been selling out every Friday night. Recently, we've sold out for things. So a lot of folks are very interested. Our website, again, astro.umaine.edu, or you can look up Jordan Planetarium or Versant Power Astronomy Center, you'll see it. We're also on Facebook. We post things there too. And general email, an email that's really easy to reach me at, is just planetarium@maine.edu. You can also use my first name, last name @maine.edu, so Shawn.Laatsch. But I know my last name is a little bit of a German mess, so sometimes it can be hard for folks to spell and know what to do with. But I really, really encourage you to get out and try to see this eclipse. And I hope that we have some clear skies for it. This is one of the most spectacular things you'll see. And I really, really hope that you get to see it, and please do so safely. That's the biggest thing. All righty, with that, I will see if there are questions from anyone about the eclipse or what we're doing with it or things of that nature.
Questions for Shawn?
What got you interested in astronomy? Did you see an eclipse when you were a kid and then it just took off from there?
So my grandfather showed me the Big and Little Dipper when I was in 2nd grade. And that got me kind of excited. Later that year, I went to a planetarium, and that kind of really got me going in terms of astronomy and the night sky in particular. I did get to see a solar eclipse when I was 9. My family traveled up to Canada, and it happened that they weren't traveling there for that. They were traveling to visit friends, and so happened that there was an eclipse at that same time. So I did get to see one when I was a kid, and that also, all those things, along with Star Wars coming out when I was 7 and Carl Sagan's Cosmos. So there's a variety of things. But I always say kind of my grandfather, showing me the the Big Dipper and Little Dipper were sort of the things that really got me going.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Shawn, this has been an absolutely wonderful program, far more than I ever thought we'd get when I invited you. So I truly appreciate your sharing your knowledge about this and your passion for this. It's really clear how neat these things are for you.
Yeah, they're really, really spectacular. I feel very lucky. I got to start working in a planetarium when I was a high school student. I grew up in central Wisconsin, and our high school had a planetarium, and that's kind of where I got my start. And what's interesting is a lot of folks, think of folks as being, you know, very specialized, but actually about 80% of the planetariums in the United States are ones that are like at the University of Maine or in K-12 schools. There was a lot of those built during the space race because, astronauts had to know celestial navigation back in the day. And that's where they started, but they're still out there today. And I was lucky enough to start when I was 14, and this fall, and it'll be 40 years I've been in the planetarium, so a long time. But it's fun. I do love it. I really love sharing. I tell folks I'm not a deep research astronomer. I'm a astronomy educator. I love sharing it with people. That's my gig.
Well, and it shows. What
John,
do animals out in the woods do during an eclipse? What sort of things would they do? Behaviors?
Yeah, so it is interesting. There's been a few, and NASA even has a project to watch animals this time around. Animals tend to get very quiet because they think it's going into nighttime. So they would typically do what they're get ready for like twilight, what they normally would do. So chickens sometimes will go to sleep. Other animals will calm down. And those who typically would hunt at night would start to get a little bit energized. There was a really interesting story on NPR a few weeks ago about during the 2017 eclipse, there was an ecologist who went to the Oregon Zoo and studied animals. And, again, a lot of them calm down and get ready for nighttime because it confuses them. And he found that the bulk of animals really did that. They sort of calmed down. But giraffes got really aggravated and started running around crazily. Flamingos also seemed to get agitated and tried to cover their young. They were really upset by it. And the tortoises became very amorous. So what and they're trying to they're trying to do that again this year, but they also want people to watch other things, watch other animals, like and just to experience what they might do. And one of the things is, people often ask me about, like, is it safe to let my dog out during the eclipse? Are they going to burn their eyes? Animals are smart. They're not going to stare at the sun, so they don't need to worry about, having eclipse glasses or anything like that. They know they're smart enough. They know not to do that. It's kind of innate with them. So you don't have to worry about that particular thing, but they are affected by it. And one of the most dramatic things that I personally witnessed that was interesting is in the 1999 eclipse, I was in the Black Sea on a ship. And during totality, someone said, "Look over the side," and dolphins were poking their heads up and looking at this thing. It was really, during totality, it was really interesting. The dolphins were, kind of bobbing up and down and looking, and it was really interesting. So I mean, birds and animals do pay attention because, again, it changes the environment that they're used to, and so they do pay attention to it. Sorry for the long answer there, but it's an interesting one. It's an interesting thing.
Thank you.
Shawn, we have a certificate of appreciation. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
And we're going to have Rita send it to you. Normally, we're here to shake your hand and thank you in person, but on behalf of the Kiwanis, we certainly appreciate all this wonderful information you've given us. And like Dave said, it's obvious your passion for this. It's just truly amazing. Thank you.
So, Brian, we may want to check the spelling. I think I left the S out of his name when I was promoting his talk.
No worries. I tell folks that's a pretty common thing with my last name. That's why I use planetarium at maine.edu as an easier email.
Rita's way ahead of you, Dave. She spelled it right.
She's always that good.
Yeah. Any other questions for Shawn?
Any questions in the room there? Got a quiet group this
I-
morning.
I appreciate your shirt. It's
Oh, thanks.
stellar.
Yeah, I often joke that my wife and my sister dress me because for the holidays, I often end up with astronomy themed shirts, I guess. Which the kids love, by the way. You know, when I'm working with the elementary kids and we'll have groups later this morning at the planetarium, they always enjoy them, so it's kind of fun.
Well, Shawn, thank you for getting up and joining us so early this morning. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much for having me, and again, clear skies, everyone, for that eclipse.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shawn.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take
Bye.
care. And Toby, thank you so much for hooking us up. We would have been dead in the water here if it hadn't been for you this morning, so thank you. So, how about happy sad dollars?